Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're cracking open Chapter 1 and tackling a really big foundational concept, power sharing. It sounds simple, right? But we're going to explore how dividing control, literally distributing authority, might actually be the ultimate secret weapon for keeping a highly diverse country united and peaceful.
We kind of have to start by throwing out a super common assumption. For the longest time, the conventional wisdom was that all the power in a government had to sit with one person or one specific group just to get things done quickly. The old math basically said sharing power equals dividing power, which just equals a weaker country. But as we're about to see today, that equation is completely flawed. It's actually a brilliant paradox sitting right at the very heart of democratic politics. Let's look at two real-world case studies to figure out why.
To really get this, let's look at Belgium first. It's a tiny European country with a population of just over 1 crore, so roughly half the size of the Indian state of Haryana. But man, their demographic split is a giant, complicated puzzle. You've got 59% of the country speaking Dutch, 40% speaking French, and a tiny 1% slice speaking German.
And it's not just a mix, they are physically separated. Up north, in the Flemish region, you have your Dutch-speaking majority. Down south, in the Wallonia region, that's where the French speakers live. And that little sliver over to the east, that's the German-speaking community. It is a very tight geographic squeeze of totally distinct cultures and languages.
But here is where it gets wild. The capital city, Brussels, completely flips the entire national demographic on its head. So nationally, Dutch speakers are the majority, right? Well, inside the capital city, a whopping 80% of the people speak French, and only 20% speak Dutch. Talk about a recipe for tension. The national Dutch majority could so easily just force its will on everyone, which could literally split Brussels right down the middle.
Now, let's jump across the globe to Sri Lanka. It's an island nation, also with about 2 crore people, so again, very similar in population size to Haryana, but with a totally different, heavily skewed ethnic makeup. Here, 74% of the population are Sinhala speakers. That is a massive numerical majority. The Tamil speakers, which includes both Sri Lankan and Indian Tamils, make up about 18%.
So you've got two incredibly diverse nations. How did they handle it? Well, they went down two vastly different paths. Belgium leaned hard into something called accommodation, while Sri Lanka went all in on majoritarianism. Let's unpack Sri Lanka's majoritarian approach first. Basically, the Sinhala majority used their massive numbers to just dictate terms. In 1956, they passed an act recognizing Sinhala as the one and only official language, totally sidelining the Tamil minority. The government started heavily favoring Sinhala applicants for university positions and government jobs, and when the Tamil population demanded regional autonomy, denied, over and over. This eventually sparked the rise of political groups in the 1980s, demanding an entirely independent state, Tamil Eelam, in the north and east.
The crucial takeaway here is that forcing the will of the majority on everyone else might look like a quick, efficient fix in the short term, but the long-term reality? It was devastating. This majoritarian strategy deeply alienated the minority and ultimately plunged the country into a tragic civil war. Thousands of lives were lost on both sides, and the entire unity of the nation was shattered.
Now, flip back to Belgium. Their leaders took one look at that kind of potential disaster and chose a radically different path: complex accommodation. They actually amended their constitution 4 separate times just to make it work. They legally mandated that the number of Dutch and French-speaking ministers had to be exactly equal in the central government. They gave that tricky capital, Brussels, its own separate government, again with equal representation. They even invented this fascinating third tier of government, a community government, elected solely by language groups to handle cultural and educational issues. Plus, in 1993, they officially moved from a highly centralized unitary system to a federal one.
And you know what? It worked. By respecting everyone's interests and literally building a system where no single group could just bulldoze the others, Belgium completely avoided civic strife. They proved that sharing power didn't tear them apart. It actually saved them from a messy linguistic partition. It kept them whole. Section 1. Why share power? The Prudential versus moral debate.
So let's break down the why behind all of this. First up is the prudential reason. This is the purely practical, outcome-driven side of things. Sharing power is smart because it actively lowers the temperature. It reduces the chances of conflict between social groups, which obviously brings political stability. It acknowledges a really hard truth that tyranny of the majority isn't just terrible for the minority, it usually ends up destroying the majority too in the long run.
But then we go deeper, to the moral reason. This argues that power sharing is literally the soul of democracy. I mean, democratic rule inherently means sharing power with the people who actually have to live under that rule, right? People have a basic, fundamental right to be consulted on how they're governed. A truly legitimate government is one where citizens have a real stake in the system because they're actively participating in it.
Section 2. The how. The 4 forms of power sharing in practice.
Structurally, this distribution happens in 2 main ways. First, you've got horizontal distribution, sharing power across different branches at the exact same level. And second, vertical distribution, cascading power down from a central top authority to local levels. Let's look a little closer at these.
Horizontal power sharing is all about the core organs of government, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. You probably know this as the system of checks and balances. It guarantees that no single branch gets to play dictator. For example, the executive branch gets to appoint the judges, but those exact same judges have the power to check the actions of the executive. It's a continuous, dynamic loop that keeps everyone honest.
Then there's the vertical division, which we usually just call federalism. This is about taking power from a general, central government and sharing it all the way down to provincial or regional tiers. It totally scraps the old-school idea that all political power has to be locked up in one centralized vault. By giving lower tiers actual constitutional guarantees, like Belgium did with their massive 1993 shift, you put real, actionable power into the hands of local people.
But hey, it's not all about official government buildings. The third form is sharing power directly among social, religious, and linguistic groups. This is absolutely critical so that minority communities don't feel entirely shut out of the process. Belgium's whole community government concept is a perfect example of this. Or take India's system of reserved constituencies, ensuring that weaker sections of society are legally guaranteed a seat at the table in assemblies and parliament.
And finally, the fourth form, and this one is super dynamic. Power is shared through the constant, everyday clash of political parties and pressure groups. Democracy means you have to have choices, right? Sometimes this is overt, like when different parties have to team up to form a coalition government. But it's also about interest groups, farmers, traders, union workers who actively shape public policy from the outside, making sure the politicians aren't the only ones holding the reins.
Bringing this whole Chapter 1 explainer together, we've looked at the massive contrast between forcing majoritarianism and choosing accommodation. Whether you're slicing power horizontally across branches, vertically down to states, socially across different communities, or politically among rival factions, the golden rule remains exactly the same. Sharing power does not weaken a country, it actually stabilizes it. To wrap up, I want to leave you with something to really chew on. We just saw how totally ignoring minority voices ended in tragedy in Sri Lanka, and how getting really creative with structural accommodation built lasting peace in Belgium. So take a look around your own life. Look at your local government, your workplace, your local institutions. If sharing power is genuinely the true spirit of democracy, who is currently being left out of the conversation in your community right now? Think about it. Thanks for tuning in and keep questioning the structures around you.